Hello, my name is Oleksiy Hamanyuk, and today we are talking with the head of Eastern European branch of the History Department in the Bonn University, Professor Dr. Martin Aust. Hello.
Hello, Oleksiy.
And our today's topic is a very interesting one. It is the history of Ukraine in the period of 1917-1921. So basically late World War I, start of revolutions and establishing the new Europe. So Professor Aust, what is your first association when you think about this period in the context of Ukrainian history?
Yes, that is indeed a very important question. But before we will get to that question, just let me relate something to you. I just came across a video on YouTube. It's a Ukrainian song performed by Pink Floyd, Ой у лузі червона калина. And I was wondering how much history is in that song. Does it have to do anything with the topic we are discussing today, and what made Pink Floyd perform that song?
Yes, I also saw this video, and it was really impressive how Pink Floyd sings the Ukrainian song. By the way, we will also have the link to this video in the description of our video, so you can also watch it. And basically, this is very important song nowadays. And on the demonstrations, you probably, if you visited any Ukrainian demonstrations, you have probably heard this song. And the song basically gets in the history to the period of World War I, when Stepan Chernetsky wrote it in the version that we know it nowadays. And basically, this was a song of Ukrainians who fought in the Austrian army during the World War I. But coming back to our topic of Ukraine in 1917-1921, probably let's consider the moment when the revolution in Russian Empire started, and what happened in Ukraine during that time.
That's of course an important question, but before addressing it, I would like to highlight once more how interesting it is that there's that one song, Ой у лузі червона калина, and in that song, the current struggle to defend Ukraine is related to the fight for independence in history. So it's interesting how much history there is in that one very song. As to Russia in 1917 and Ukraine, in February 1917, there is the end of autocracy, the end of the Tsarist Empire in Russia. There is a revolutionary government, and this is the time when there is also a Ukrainian revolution in central Ukraine and in Kiev. And the basic idea is to establish Ukrainian autonomy in what shall become in the future a Russian republic. So that is the very basic idea.
Okay, and what has been done for that? So there was this idea, there were many ideas, but how did Ukrainians proceed to implement this idea?
They established the Central Rada in Kiev, which is the central representation of revolutionary Ukraine. And very soon it became evident that the revolutionary government in Petrograd in Russia was not ready to accept even the very idea of Ukrainian autonomy. So in that Russian government there was a dispute about that issue of Ukrainian autonomy, and that dispute indeed toppled the very first Russian revolutionary government. Ukraine had a firm idea of that autonomy in what was to come.
Okay, so you mentioned Central Rada, and there were probably different people, different politicians there, and they had different political views. Let's briefly mention what were the main political views among Central Rada members.
The mainstream was social revolutionary, and the idea was to establish democracy in Ukraine. And in terms of social politics, it was a policy oriented towards the peasantry in Ukraine.
So basically, it wasn't nationalistic views in terms of later stages of Ukrainian history, but these were more left-wing oriented social democracy, let's say it like that, views. Am I right?
Yes, right. And there was even the notion that there should be a Ukrainian statehood, which should not be limited to ethnic Ukrainians, but which should be open and available to all groups resident in Ukraine.
Yeah, that is very important to know in the context of our later videos that will also appear on this channel. So don't forget to subscribe and follow us. And coming back to our topic, okay, we discussed the early stages of the revolution in Russia, but what happened when Bolsheviks took power? Did the policy in Petrograd change to to Ukraine and to Central Rada in particular?
The Bolsheviks had their very own designs on Ukraine. And from the very start, that was a sharp conflict between the Ukrainian Revolution and the Bolshevik seizure of power in Russia. And that led the Central Rada to declare Ukrainian independence early in 1918.
So independence was declared in early 1918, but what did Bolsheviks do with that? So did they just accept it, or did they start their offense?
At that very moment, the Bolsheviks could not do anything about Ukraine because the idea of Ukrainian independence was supported by Germany, by the German Empire. And the Germans had their very own ideas about their rule across Eastern Europe. And they concluded a peace treaty with the Bolsheviks, with revolutionary Russia. And they also established their rule in Ukraine. That sounds difficult to grasp because on the one hand there is independent Ukraine, and on the other hand there are the Germans. And at that time, Ukrainian independence really was backed by the German military. So, to a certain degree, Ukrainian independence at that time depended on the German military. And the Germans used that to extract resources from Ukraine. So what the Germans were really interested in was not that much Ukrainian independence. It was to use the Ukrainian economy, agriculture, industry to extract all the necessary resources to fight on the war on their Western Front against France, England, and America.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So you are probably talking already about Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and Skoropadsky, who came into power shortly after that. So it's important question. So there is a Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and Russia recognized Ukrainian independent state in this treaty. Am I right?
There are indeed two treaties of Brest-Litovsk. There is one concluded by Ukraine, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. And this treaty indeed establishes Ukrainian independence, and these powers recognize Ukraine as an independent state. And the second Brest-Litovsk treaty is from March 1918. It is between Germany and the Bolsheviks, meaning revolutionary Russia, which ends the war between Russia and Germany. In legal terms, there is no Bolshevik recognition of Ukrainian independence in that treaty. But well, as a matter of fact, the Bolsheviks at that time had to realize that as long as the German military is in the region, Ukraine is off limits for the Bolsheviks. Skoropadsky is indeed the person at the helmet of the Ukrainian state. And he was most of all installed by the Germans because the Germans expected that he could secure the transfer of all these resources from Ukraine to Germany. So although its independence, Skoropadsky was in a very weak position and very soon became unpopular in Ukraine because he was perceived as a German puppet.
Yeah, probably many Ukrainians didn't want to give their grains for free, and that was why Skoropadsky was unpopular. But very short after that, so like it was the power of Skoropadsky. It lasted just half a year, and after that he loses power. So why did this happen, and what happens next?
Yes, you're right. You already implied the answer. So Skoropadsky replied on the Central Powers, especially on Germany. And once there are revolutions in Germany and in Austria, in Berlin and in Vienna, this not only means the end of monarchies in Germany and Austria, it also implies the end of Skoropadsky in Kiev. And that paves the way for yet another revolution, a People's Republic of Ukraine in the parts of the former Habsburg Empire, which then very soon merges with the Ukrainian independent state in Kiev. And there is an interesting video available on YouTube. In January 1919, the army of these two united Ukrainian republics marches into Kiev. That's also available on YouTube. And I think we will put the link into the description of the video so that you can have a look at that film which documents the Ukrainian army and Ukrainian independence in 1919.
Yes, so you mentioned very important point in Ukrainian history. It was basically a union between Ukrainian People's Republic with the capital in Kiev and Western Ukrainian People's Republic with the capital in Lviv. And this happened on the 22nd of January of 1919. And today we celebrate this as a national holiday, and people stand in lines and holding their hands and having Ukrainian flags to show that we all stay united from west to the east. And it is a very big holiday in today's Ukraine. But you mentioned what happened in Ukraine after Skoropadsky was gone. But what about Bolsheviks? So previously they had a treaty with Germans that they basically stay in the borders of Russian Socialistic Republic. But then, as you mentioned, there was a revolution in Germany, and what do Bolsheviks do after that?
Well, basically, the Bolsheviks start to attack Ukraine and start occupying Ukraine. On their minds is world revolution, which means, first of all, there has to be a revolution in Europe, and it starts in the neighboring countries. So there is a Bolshevik attack on Ukraine. And later on, there is also a Bolshevik Polish war, which so the Bolsheviks would help to export their revolution to Europe.
So at this moment, you mentioned Poland. And basically, as you said, there were revolutions in Germany, in Austrian Empire, and after that, Poland also regained its independence. What was the politics like of Poland, so like from the western side towards Ukraine?
Well, Poland regaining its statehood put Ukraine in a very difficult situation because, well, in terms of territory, there was a certain overlap between the Polish and the Ukrainian projects, especially Lviv in Lemberg. Pilsudski, well, one of the very leading politicians who helped to regain Polish statehood, well, he had the map of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth on his mind, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth of the 18th century. And we have to remember that, well, nowadays cities as Lithuanian capital Vilnius, Ukrainian city Lviv, they were part of that Commonwealth. And so Pilsudski's idea was, well, to get that back, and he used military force to occupy Vilnius and Lviv, and that well led to a very sharp Polish-Ukrainian conflict, also in the further course of the 20th century. But after Pilsudski took Lviv, he was ready to cooperate with the Ukrainian state because he was also interested in creating a buffer zone against the Bolsheviks and revolutionary Russia. Polish troops helped the Ukrainian army to recapture Kiev from the Bolsheviks in May 1920. But then the Bolsheviks once again occupied Kiev and moved westwards to Warsaw, where their military campaign ultimately failed. In the end, it all comes down to the peace treaty of Riga in 1921, which really shaped the fate of Ukraine in the 1920s and the 1930s. It ultimately partitioned the Ukrainian lands between Poland and the Soviet Union, or what was to become the Soviet Union in 1922.
Yeah, so taking into account all this history and could we say now that basically Ukrainian revolution of and like fighting for independence of 1917, 1921 basically failed, or is it not that simple?
Well, I think at first sight it's indeed tempting to say that it failed because independence was lost. But at a second glance, I would agree that things are more complex. Well, first of all, Ukrainian independence in that period serves as an example for following generations. It's important to know that there once was Ukrainian independence. And second, well, it put Ukraine and the Ukrainian nation on the agenda. And when the Bolsheviks founded the Soviet Union in 1922, well, they somehow had to take that into consideration. And Lenin insisted on a nationality policy in the Soviet Union that perceived the republics of the Soviet Union as national projects, and one of them was the Socialist Republic of Ukraine, in which the Bolsheviks, to a certain degree, helped to establish the Ukrainian language and Ukrainian culture. And although that was not independence, at the same time that was more than there was, especially in the late Tsarist Empire, when Ukrainian publications and the Ukrainian language were completely forbidden and abolished.
Okay, so you are already talking a bit about what happened afterwards, but not in terms of the historical facts of like that happened afterwards, but in terms of views of the political establishment, if we may say it like that, of Ukraine. So main thinkers, those people, like for example, who formed the Central Rada, they had some project, they had some idea in mind. And you mentioned that it was that the mainstream in Central Rada at the very beginning was left-wing, socially revolutionary. And then we observed that Ukrainian attempt to gain a state basically failed, even though the revolution and the long run outcome didn't fail, but at that particular point of time there was no independent Ukraine anymore. And did this create some kind of disappointment of this left-wing approach of making Ukrainian state, and to what ideas did it lead?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we should get back to this in our following episode, because the Ukrainian national movement, of course, further existed. And it was scattered across a couple of countries, and these countries provided very different conditions under which the Ukrainian national movement could exist. And especially when we're discussing the so-called organization of Ukrainian nationalists, they said, well, it's time to learn a lesson from the failure of Ukrainian independence in the period we discussed in this episode, and that had very significant repercussions on the understanding of what the Ukrainian nation might be.
Thank you very much, Professor Aust. It was very interesting talk, and as Professor Aust has already mentioned, next time we are talking about organization of Ukrainian nationalists. All the materials that we mentioned in our video and some additional material, we will place it in the description of the video, and we encourage you all to learn more about Ukrainian history of this period, and not only. So stay tuned, and next time we will talk about very interesting topic, organization of Ukrainian nationalists.
Stay tuned. До побачення.